First, a question on judicial nominations. What will be your approach to voting on nominees for the U.S. Supreme Court, and which current justice comes closest to your idea of a correct understanding of the Constitution? We'll begin with Senator Barkley.
Senator Barkley?
Yes.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Qualifications for Supreme Court Justice. One, that they have the judicial temperament to be a good Supreme Court judge. Number two, they will follow precedent. They aren't going to be activist judges. They're going to follow precedents, not create things that aren't there, and strictly follow the Constitution as it's written. Too many people think the Constitution is a living document. It's not. It's dead. But we have to interpret it a little bit, but do not go off on tangents on the Constitution. I would not ask them how they would vote on Roe v. Wade. I mean, that's something that they shouldn't ask anyway. But those are basic qualifications they have right now, and I'm trying to think of who the current justices that I would admire most. I'm going to pass. I can't come up with one. If I do, I'll tell you later. I can't.
I'll give you some time to think about it. Senator Coleman.
Yeah. First, let me talk about. Hey, by the way, how long is the response to these? Are 1 minute, like 2 minutes? Sort of excitement. Let me just first talk a little bit about the importance of the issue. We've had 3 branches of government, and the co-equal, and judges are very powerful, and they have an incredible impact on our lives, on the economy, on the values that reflect in this country. So I take that responsibility of advising and consenting as the Constitution gives me that responsibility very, very, very seriously. And this should be an issue that shouldn't be a partisan issue. There should be objective, neutral standards that start with integrity, that go to intellect. There are groups like the ABA, so they're not the most conservative group of the country, that do great judges, and I listen to that. It's been a shame that a number of judges have not even had in the circuit court, as levels below the Supreme Court, not even a chance to go forward because one side blocks them. Democrats do it when they're in power, Republicans did that when they're in power. And I think that's unfortunate. And most important to me is the concept that judges need to interpret the Constitution, not legislate from the bench. That is the basic standard. Interpret the Constitution, not legislate from the bench. And if the judges come forward and you don't ask them about their position on a singular case, but you say, well, you interpret the Constitution, not legislate from the bench. We don't want, judges saying we're going to take, God out of the Pledge of Allegiance. Folks can come in with their own social policy and decide what the law should be. John Roberts, who I had a chance to confirm, I think is an outstanding judge. I think he brings the intellect, the integrity, and I think he brings the philosophy that all judges should have. And as you interpret the Constitution, you don't legislate from the bench.
Thank you. Mr. Franken.
Well, one of us is going to be elected senator, and we're going to be voting on probably 2 or 3 Supreme Court justices. And these justices will be deciding some pretty important decisions. Probably reinterpreting Roe v. Wade. Maybe settling a presidential election. If I were asked what I thought were some bad decisions, Bush v. Gore would be kind of on the top. You want judicial temperament. You want experience. You want a record of looking at the writings and seeing the level of intellect there. Now, let's talk about activist judges. Who's the most activist judge on the Supreme Court? By Senator Coleman's definition is Clarence Thomas. He's the one who's overturned more cases that have been passed by legislatures than anyone else. He's the most activist justice. I like Stephen Breyer. And Stephen Breyer is someone who does believe in a living Constitution. The Constitution isn't ossified. The new thing, that's the beauty of the Constitution. So think it's important the other judges that we pick in the judiciary, and also that the Justice Department not be used as a political arm of the executive, which it has been throughout this administration.
I got some answers.
All right, good.
First, I go former that I really like was Warren Burger and Sandra Day O'Connor. I think they were both very good judges that were independent-minded and usually did the right thing. And the most interesting judge in the current Supreme Court is Scalia. He's a fascinating man. I've listened to him, his philosophy. He's very much a strict constructionist, but I admire that guy. I don't know if I agree with him all the time, but I like Scalia.
Thank you, Senator Coleman.
I agree with the characterization of Scalia about an extraordinary man. Let me say this. I think you have to be real careful about judicial nominations, women nominations being politicized. And that's the danger we run. Up until recently, we didn't filibuster judges, and then we got into filibustering judges. I will apply the same standards to judges that came before with President Bush, come before with any other president, regardless of the party. I think you really do have to have some very clear standards about intellect, about integrity, about judicial philosophy. And if we start getting into the politicization of Supreme Court judges, I think our very republic is at stake.
That the judiciary should not be politicized. And that's what I fear happened during this administration, particularly the Justice Department. And we've seen that they violated the law in doing that. And again, I want to talk about the judiciary as a whole. That was very politicized too. The Bush administration chose judges that were very ideological. I don't want ideological judges. I just don't, because issues change. I do want a justice that believes in the right of privacy. And then Scalia and I actually had a disagreement over something once. He said that